What an absurdly beautiful morning. It's late April, and the constantly fluctuating rain and sun of the last few weeks has conspired to nourish Dartmoor's plants, who are finally springing to life with a surprising suddenness and verdancy. Really, I wish I could provide more sensory information to you beyond the sights and sounds, because the air out here was thick and fresh and cool, perfumed with damp earth and blooming flowers. The budding trees are attracting the wine of insect life that has lain dormant over the winter, and in turn the birds who feed on those insects are beginning to sing and mark out their territory for nesting season. And in their turn, the birds attract the bird watchers. That's what I'll be talking about today. A bit about the migrant birds who return to our hills every year to eat our delicious British caterpillars, and a bit on the birders who observe the returning birds. What motivates them? How do they tell one little brown bird from another? And what are they writing in that notebook of theirs? Welcome back to the Dartmoor podcast. First up, let's define some terminology around bird watchers. Anyone who enjoys feeding the birds in their garden and who knows a duck from a goose can call themselves a bird watcher. They might take a pair of binoculars with them out on a stroll, and they might even choose their walks based on a visit to a nice hide or such like. But no one who's serious about birds calls themselves a bird watcher. They call themselves birders, and I'm proud to say that's how I identify. Bird watching, I suppose, implies a voyeuristic passivity, whereas birding seems much more active and dynamic. It's verby. To bird. I'm going birding. Let's bird this mother flipper. Birders like to identify things, taxonomise them. They can find a lesser spotted woodpecker by following its call, separate a tree pipit from a meadow pipit, and they can tell you that a distant spot is a buzzard by the way it's climbing into the sky. And birders like lists. They might keep a list of birds they've seen that day, or birds they've seen in the UK, or all the birds that they have seen in their lifetime. But if a birder becomes unhealthily engrossed with the lists, if the numbers become more important than enjoying seeing and learning about the birds themselves, that, my friends, is where you get a twitcher. Twitchers are the true obsessives. People, almost always men, who will get a shift off work at the drop of a hat because they've heard of a rare bunting on the Isle of Scilly, then charter a plane to go and tick it off their lists. Britain's top twitchers might have seen in excess of 500 different species of bird in the UK alone. Now, just call it jealousy if you like, but many in the birding community believe that twitching misses the point in birding altogether. It shouldn't be about the numbers on a page, especially as twitchers have a bit of a reputation for appearing at the sight of a rare bird, glancing at it through some binoculars, then driving off again, rather than spending any time observing it. In fact, twitchers can be seen as a bit of a nuisance, turning up in droves to tick a species, generally annoying locals, landowners, other birders and the bird itself in the process. This event is called a twitch. Luckily, twitches and twitchers aren't much of a problem on Dartmoor. Really rare birds tend to turn up on the coast. Still, there are exceptions, such as the absurdly improbable lammergeier that turned up on Dartmoor in May 2016. A lammergeier, by the way, is an alpine-dwelling bone-eating vulture with close to a 3-metre wingspan. The closest place you'd expect to see one would be the Alps or the Pyrenees, so a fairly impressive wander for that particular bird. So, in order of obsession, bird watchers, birders, twitchers. Can I add one more? The really cool birders today are patchers. Birders who are loyal to a particular patch. I bet you can guess where my patch is. As a patcher, unlike a twitcher, you aren't burning a load of fossil fuels traversing the country in pursuit of a rare warbler. In fact, it is inevitably the patchers who find the rare birds that the twitchers twitch. And patchers get all the thrill of a twitcher when finding a new bird on their patch, even if it's a fairly common bird nationally. If you need an example of this, listen to how happy I was to see a red grouse in the recent Dartmoor 365 episode. Patching makes you super familiar with one place, with its rhythms and idiosyncrasies, its hidden hollows and secret treasures. And you soon realise that there's enough to learn in one little woodland on East Dartmoor to last you a lifetime. Intense scrutiny of one place reveals to you what I call the interconnectedness of everything. This bird is here because it eats this particular insect, and this insect is here because it lays its eggs on this particular plant, and this particular plant is here because it likes this kind of soil. There's something very satisfying in uncovering these links, and it makes you feel really small and awestruck in the face of such complex webs of interconnectedness. Anywho, as a patcher, I'm pretty much too cool to write lists these days. With one exception, my patch year list. This is every species of bird I've seen on Dartmoor in that particular year, and with spring in bloom, it's a very special time for my patch year list, because the migrants are returning. Today I'm on a mission to Yarner Wood to tick off some of the birds that have newly arrived. They are firsts, the first of such species I've seen this year. So if I saw a goshawk, woodcock, red kite, lesser-spotted woodpecker or hen harrier today, as wonderful as that would be, they would not be firsts for the year, so would not be added to the list. Migrant birds are extra special to the patcher. And here's our first, a beautiful little bird of the woodland fringes, a willow warbler. The willow warbler, as a bird that eats only insects, couldn't survive a winter in Britain, so instead flies all the way to sub-Saharan Africa for half the year. Then, when things get a bit too hot, it flies all the way back to Britain to sing its song, attract a mate, build a nest and raise its young. Crazy to think that a few days ago this little chap could have been sat in an acacia tree on the savannah watching a herd of elephants trundle by. It's a lovely moment to hear that beautiful, liquid, lilting cadence again after so many months away. A mellifluous run up the scale before a melancholy descent that seems to trail off into uncertainty. To those in the know, that is the sound of the world revolving around the sun. The planet has taken another breath. Spring has returned, and all is as it should be. The willow warbler has a look-alike cousin that is also a migrant, albeit a more short-distance one arriving from southern Europe. The Chiffchaff, so called because, well, it's a good job that it does have such an annoying repetitive little song though, because otherwise Chiffchaffs and willy wobblers would be very difficult to tell apart, and I wouldn't know what to write on my list. Indeed, some older bird books recommend that if unheard, you note these creatures down as willow chiffs. There's an interesting point to be made here about bird identification. Recently, my best friend sent me a text about a bird he'd seen out of his office window. It had, he said, a brownish belly with black around the eyes and black and white wings. This is exactly the sort of text birders get from non-birders all the time, and they're often a bit of a puzzle. This is because birding Gentiles always seem to focus on the colour of a bird. If birders did this, we'd have no chance with willow chiffs. I texted him back the more important questions. What size and shape was it? How was it behaving? Well, once we'd established that it was almost magpie-sized and possibly dove-shaped, there's only one thing it could realistically be. A jay. Lovely. But this led me to wonder something. How did my friend miss the bright blue patch on the jay's wing? Also, surely a jay is more pink than brown. And it doesn't have a mask exactly, more of a moustache. Is this a product of imperfect memory? Or does a non-birder actually perceive the world differently to a birder? Because I know what to look for in a jay, do I somehow see it more clearly? Are we birders seeing the world in higher definition than the rest of you laymen? Or is my memory of a jay equally warped? Am I remembering every jay as actually more archetypally jay-y than they are, as I project my expectations onto it? I'm probably seeing cars wrong. My head hurts thinking about this. Anyway, briefly back to willow chiffs. Even if they aren't singing, an experienced birder can tell them apart from subtle features of their shape and behaviour. For starters, a willow warbler has noticeably longer wings, what the nerdy birders would call a primary protection, to deal with that long flight. But perhaps more obviously, the chiffchaff is a clumsy little dunce who is always awkwardly bobbing his tail as if he's about to fall off his branch. While the willow warbler, well, elegance and poise personified. Okay, I've bored you with all the ID stuff. Let's now look at a little bird which can hardly be confused with anything else. A real Dartmoor speciality, the pied flycatcher. This smart little fellow is a male pied flycatcher, another long-distance migrant who may have been flitting around the dense tropical rainforest of the Congo in his tuxedo a few days ago. The males are the first back from Africa as they seek to find a territory and a place to nest that will impress the females when they finally arrive. Pied flycatchers nest in holes in mature old trees, which don't really exist in great quantities on Dartmoor, even in a woodland as beautiful as Yarna. So, once people realised their numbers were declining, they set up a nest box scheme to make up for the lack of natural nesting places. It's been a wild success, and a trip to Yarna at this time of year all but guarantees seeing one of these aerial micro-orcas. As a twitcher might say, PFC's nailed on at Yarna. Let's put him on the list. No episode of the Dartmoor podcast would be complete without a moment of wry melancholy veiling a genuine kernel of existential terror. And if we're talking about firsts, then it seems fitting to mention lasts. This is a really special place for me. Trendlebere Down is a beautiful secluded outcrop, an enormous sleeping sphinx hidden among the undergrowth on the steep hillside of Becker Brook, just a short trot from Yarna Wood. One day, on a day just like this one, back in 2017, on my annual pilgrimage to tick my firsts, I sat here to have a cup of tea, when suddenly a beautiful sound like the spinning of a small coin on a marble counter rained down towards me through the budding trees. And there, parachuting down out of the branches, was a gorgeous wood warbler. A bird similar to the willow warbler in some ways, but with a soft cotton-white belly and a slash of bright yellow above the eye. I sat and watched him make his rapturous display for about 15 minutes while I drank my cuppa. I was dead chuffed, because although I ticked one off in these woodlands every year, they are shy and subtle in their habits, spending a lot of time high up in the canopy, and I never had such a great view. Little was I to know that that would be the last wood warbler I'd see on Dartmoor. It seems we lost them, and no one knows why for certain, though it seems that climate change might be forcing them north and east in their range. I still keep my ears peeled though, and it would be a happy day to hear one on my patch again. Right, let's stop being gloomy and tick off a few more firsts. Do you have to see a bird to tick it? Well, the rather loud, random, raspy noise emanating from this gorse bush can only be my first whitethroat of the year. I'm having it. This chap is a tree pipit, another bird that has flown here all the way from southern Africa in the last week. Pipits are an identification nightmare, as there are many species that all look extremely similar. You're just going to have to trust me this is a tree pipit. Look, it's in a tree and everything. Here's one of my favourite singers, a blackcap. The migratory status of these is a bit confusing, as some actually brave the British winter nowadays, though most head to their holiday homes in North Africa. Blackcap isn't a first for me, but it's nice to hear that they've started singing again. And this is a very unexpected first, as he's back pretty early. A cuckoo. Sadly, a car drove past and scared him off before I could film him calling. Cuckoos are absolutely fascinating. So much so, in fact, that they'll get their own episode at some point, I think. Not a bad day's work, all told, though I've left myself an excuse to come back in a couple of weeks to tick off redstart, nightjar and garden warbler. Anyway, it's good to know the earth still has a pulse. It gives me so much happiness to see the cycle come round again and to experience these rhythms in nature, and I hope you enjoyed me sharing it with you. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you next time.